Today I'm going to cover 4 of the worst bulking myths that I've heard, probably some of the most popular myths as well, that are absolute rubbish and that you don't need to pay much attention to. So if you hear these things, now you know to ignore them. So coming in at number 4, it is when you're bulking, you need to be lifting heavier than when you're cutting. Now I'm not sure where this originated from, but there is absolutely no evidence to support this. In fact, the only evidence that we do have is around the optimal repetition range that you need to build muscle. And what that says is pretty clear, and that is that anywhere between 5 and all the way up to 30 repetitions, you can build muscle with no problem. The most important factor being, however, that you take your exercises close to failure. Now, bulking or trying to gain weight doesn't change that. Being in a calorie surplus doesn't change the repetition range that you should be training in. There's this myth that when you're bulking, when you're consuming excess calories, maybe you're a little bit heavier, that your training should switch to being more strength focused. But I'd argue that if you take that approach and your goal is literally just to build muscle in the long term, you're probably going to be worse off than someone who is using a more moderate weight, taking their exercises close to failure, and going between kind of 5 to 30 repetitions with each set. If you're trying to make a powerlifting meet, or you want to enter a strength phase for sport, or just because you want to be stronger, then go ahead. But that's not going to do you any favors in the long term for your muscle building. Coming in at number 3, and this is the emphasis that people place on protein when you're bulking. Now, the thing about bulking is that you are creating an energy surplus in your body. Your body has excess nutrients that it needs to survive, so it stores that as a mixture of body fat and muscle mass. Now, so long as you're getting in the bare kind of minimum amount of protein, your body has got so much nutrients, so much extra calories, that it's not going to have any trouble fueling the growth of new muscle tissue from your resistance training. Now, obviously, there's an extreme example here of someone who just consumes olive oil all day, or French fries, or something with hardly any protein. And yes, even if they're consuming 6,000 to 7,000 calories a day, they won't be optimizing their muscle growth because they won't be effectively spiking their muscle protein synthesis throughout the day. But for most people, when you're bulking, you're getting in so many meals with so many calories that a good handful of those meals and those snacks are going to have enough protein in them to spike your muscle protein synthesis to some degree. And that is happening so regularly because you are consuming so many calories that protein doesn't become as important as when you're in a calorie deficit. In fact, when you're in a calorie deficit, protein matters much more because the quality of the protein and the regularity of your feedings needs to be optimized to a greater degree. But when you're bulking, your body literally has so much energy that it's begging to put on new tissue. Your body is going to be pretty primed for muscle growth in that scenario. It's not going to need you to optimize your protein feedings or to the quality of your protein or the total amount of protein you're consuming in order to build new muscle. And to some degree, quoting the bro himself, Sam Sulek, he once said that
food's food. You know.
And he's right in the sense of, if you consume your calories from exclusively protein, you're going to gain the same amount of weight than if you were to consume your calories just from carbohydrates or just from fats. Coming in at number 2, and that is you need to eat regularly on a bulk. Now, there is a caveat to this, because if you are a skinny person like I was in high school and you find it difficult to gain weight and to eat a lot of food, yes, eating regularly can absolutely help with that. But it's not necessary if you're bulking. You don't need to be that concerned with how regular your protein feedings are or your meals are throughout the day. Again, because you are consuming such a large amount of total calories, your body will be absorbing and using nutrients pretty much around the clock when you're consuming that many calories. And it'll be using that for the growth of new tissue and for energy throughout the day. So if you're consuming like 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day, you don't need to be as concerned with how regular those feedings are, because even if you ate that in one meal, you're consuming enough energy really to last you for another 24 hours. Again, when you're cutting, the regularity of your protein feedings and your calorie consumption needs to be considered to a greater degree, because it is important when you consume it, because there is a real chance that you will not run out of energy, but you will have little energy at the time when, let's say, you need it most when you're working out, or that you might go a whole morning without any good quality protein, and then your body starts to favor the breakdown of muscle tissue to provide energy. But again, when you're bulking, you have that many calories, that much energy, that your body isn't concerned about losing tissue, so you don't have to worry about the frequency of your meals. Finally, coming in at number 1, and this is without a doubt the worst bit of advice that I've ever heard when it comes to bulking, and that is that lean bulking is optimal. Now, I might get a lot of flack for this, but I feel quite strongly about it based on the literature and the scientific evidence that I've seen, and I did a video about dirty bulking where I kind of talk about the research around this. But we know for any amount of weight that you gain, a portion of that weight is going to come from muscle and another portion is going to come from fat. So let's say 20% of the weight that you gain on a bulk is coming from muscle. Well, then if we take one person who gains 1 kilogram of weight in a year on a really steady, slow, lean bulk versus a person who gains 10 kilograms a year at a quicker rate, working by that 20% rule, the lean bulker is only going to gain 200 grams of muscle in a year versus the person who's growing at at a faster rate, they might gain 2 kilograms of muscle in a year. Now, yes, that's not exactly how it works, and there is an advantage to gaining slower. For example, for the person who's doing lean bulking, it's probably going to be more than 20% muscle that they gain. But as an exercise scientist, if you gave me a person and said, right, you've got 1 year to make them gain as much muscle as they possibly can, if that truly was the objective, just to gain as much muscle as possible, regardless of how much fat they gained, I would go for an aggressive bulk. I'd be looking to gain around 1 kilogram a month. Yes, it's going to gain more fat in the process, but what I'm doing there is making sure I'm not shortchanging myself in terms of the amount of muscle that I could grow. Whereas if I chose a lean bulking approach for this person, because I have some idea that it's going to turn more fat into muscle, I'm relying on the fact that I know exactly how much muscle I could possibly gain, and that I couldn't possibly gain any more muscle than that if I was in a greater calorie surplus and I gained more weight over time. Again, remember, a proportion of any weight that we gain is going to be from muscle mass. And yes, if you're trying to optimize for body composition, you might choose a leaner bulking approach. But as for it being the optimal approach to gaining muscle, that's not the case. And again, we do have some scientific evidence to say that that's the case as well. I think where people get confused is that yes, lean bulking is optimal when it comes to body composition in the long term, but if your goal is to build just as much total muscle mass as you can in a set period, then gaining weight faster is going to help you get there. And there's always a danger with lean bulking that you're too conservative with the calories. So to eliminate any doubt, I would say go for around a 500 calorie surplus. Again, that seems to be what the experts and what the research that we have at the moment recommends. That way you're going to gain weight at a decent rate, and you're probably not going to be shortchanging yourself for any muscle that you could grow. So thanks for watching, everyone. 4 myths busted there. And as always, if you like this kind of content, do hit subscribe, because these videos come twice a week at the moment, and I'll see you in the next video.